Jake Morrison had been staring at the same star charts for 3 hours when the alarm started screaming. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the flashing red lights on his control panel. The exploration vessel Horizon's Edge was supposed to be on a routine mission to map the outer rim of the Kepler 442 system, but nothing about this day felt routine anymore. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa Carter called from her communications station. Her voice had that tight edge that meant trouble. "I'm picking up energy readings that don't match anything in our database." Jake pushed himself up from his captain's chair and walked over to where Lisa was hunched over her instruments. The readings on her screen looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Instead of the usual electromagnetic signatures that came from stars or planets, this looked like something was bending space itself. "Ben, what do you think?" Jake called to his engineer, Ben Rodriguez, who was already pulling up the ship's sensor data on his tablet. "This is impossible," Ben muttered, running his fingers through his black hair. "The energy signature is coming from something massive, but it's not showing up on visual scanners. Whatever it is, it's using technology we don't understand." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Horizon's Edge was a small ship with only 5 crew members. They were explorers, not soldiers. If they had stumbled onto something dangerous, their best option was to run away as fast as possible. "How far away is it?" Jake asked. "About 200,000 kilometers in closing," Lisa replied. "Jake, it's moving toward us." The bridge fell silent except for the humming of the ship's engines. Jake looked at his crew and saw the same worry in their eyes that he felt in his chest. They were alone in deep space, days away from the nearest human outpost. "Can we outrun it?" Jake asked Ben. Ben shook his head. "Not if it's using the same technology that's creating those energy readings. We're dealing with something way more advanced than anything humans have built." Jake was about to order a retreat when the ship's main screen flickered to life. What appeared on the screen made everyone on the bridge freeze in place. It was a ship, but calling it a ship seemed wrong. It looked like someone had taken a mountain of crystal and taught it to fly through space. Light seemed to bend around its edges, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "My God," whispered Carol Martinez, the ship's medic, from her station near the back of the bridge. "How big is that thing?" "Scans show it's about 12 kilometers long," Ben said in a quiet voice. "Our entire ship could fit inside one of its smaller sections." The crystal ship moved closer, and Jake could see that it wasn't just one solid piece. Parts of it were rotating slowly, while other sections pulsed with soft blue light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Jake, they're scanning us," Lisa said. "I can feel it in our systems. They're learning everything about our ship." Before Jake could respond, the Horizon's Edge shuddered. Every light on the bridge flickered, and then the engines went silent. The constant humming that had been their background noise for months suddenly stopped. "They've disabled our engines," Ben said, his voice tight with fear. "We're completely helpless." Jake stared at the massive crystal ship on their screen. He had always known that humanity might meet other intelligent species someday, but he had never imagined it would happen like this. In all the movies and books, first contact was supposed to be planned and official, with diplomats and scientists. Instead, it was just him and his small crew, alone in the darkness of space. "Are they trying to communicate?" Jake asked Lisa. "I'm not picking up any radio signals," she replied. "But something strange is happening. I'm getting readings that suggest they're trying to access our computer systems." The main screen flickered again, and suddenly the bridge was filled with a soft, musical sound. It wasn't coming from their speakers, but seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The sound was so beautiful that Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. "What is that?" Carol asked. Before anyone could answer, the air in the middle of the bridge began to shimmer. Jake watched in amazement as the light seemed to fold in on itself, creating a doorway made of pure energy. The musical sound grew louder, and Jake felt a strange pulling sensation in his chest. "Jake, don't," Lisa said, reaching out to grab his arm. "We don't know what that is." But Jake felt drawn to the doorway. Something inside him knew that this was an invitation, not a trap. He looked at his crew one more time. "If I don't come back in an hour, contact Earth and tell them what happened here," he said. "Jake, you can't be serious," Ben said. "That could be anything. It could kill you." "If they wanted to kill us, they would have done it already," Jake replied. "They're more advanced than we are. If they want to talk, then someone needs to go." Jake stepped toward the energy doorway. The musical sound grew louder, and he felt the strange, pulling sensation get stronger. He took a deep breath and stepped. Through the world exploded into light and sound. Jake felt like he was falling through space and time at the same time. Colors that had no names flashed around him, and he heard voices speaking in languages that his mind couldn't process. Just when he thought he might lose consciousness, everything stopped. Jake found himself standing in a chamber that defied description. The walls seemed to be made of living light, constantly shifting between different colors. The floor beneath. His feet felt solid, but he could see through it to what looked like stars moving in patterns below, and then he saw her. The Queen stood in the center of the chamber, and Jake's mind struggled to understand what he was looking at. She was tall and graceful, but her body seemed to be made of energy rather than matter. Light flowed around her like water, and her eyes were like looking into deep space when she spoke. Her voice didn't come through his ears, but seemed to appear directly in his mind. "Human," she said, and her voice was like music and sadness combined. "I am Queen Seraphina of the Ethereal Collective. I have been watching your species for a long time." Jake tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. He felt like a child who had wandered into a room full of adults. "Do not be afraid," the Queen continued. "I have brought you here because I need your help. My daughter is dying, and only your people can save her." Jake finally found his voice. "I don't understand. We're just explorers. We don't have any special powers or advanced technology." The Queen's form shimmered, and Jake felt waves of emotion coming from her. Sadness, desperation, and something that might have been hope. "That is exactly why you can help," she said. "Your species is young and primitive, but you possess something that we have lost. My daughter has been infected by an ancient darkness that feeds on advanced civilizations. The more evolved a species becomes, the more vulnerable they are to its influence." Jake's mind reeled. "You're saying that because we're less advanced, we can fight something that you can't?" "Yes," the Queen replied. "The darkness grows stronger with complex thought and technology. But your people still retain the raw, instinctual responses that evolution has not yet refined away. This primitive strength is toxic to the creature that is killing my daughter." Jake stared at the Queen, trying to process what she was telling him. "Only you can save my daughter," she said, and her voice was filled with desperate hope. Jake was completely lost for words. Jake felt the world shift around him again as Queen Seraphina transported him deeper into her realm. The chamber of living light dissolved, and suddenly he was standing on what looked like a platform made of solid starlight. Below him stretched an impossible vista that made his human brain struggle to understand what he was seeing. The ethereal homeworld wasn't really a planet at all. It was a massive construct of crystal and energy that pulsed with its own inner light. Towers of pure thought spiraled upward toward artificial suns that burned with cold fire. Jake could see other beings moving through the air like living lightning, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy. "This is my world," Queen Seraphina said, her voice still speaking directly into his mind. "We have existed for millions of your years, growing in knowledge and power. But all of our advancement cannot help my daughter now." Jake watched in amazement as the Queen glided forward, her form leaving trails of silver light in the air. She led him toward a structure that rose from the center of the construct like a mountain made of black crystal. Unlike the rest of the world, this place felt cold and dark. "The royal palace," the Queen explained. "It is here that my daughter lies, dying." They passed through walls that parted like water at the Queen's approach. Jake found himself in corridors that stretched impossibly far in all directions. Strange symbols floated in the air, glowing with soft blue light. He realized they were some kind of writing, but looking at them too long made his head hurt. Mind is not designed to process our language, the Queen said, noticing his discomfort. We communicate through patterns of thought and energy. Your species uses crude sounds and symbols. Jake felt a flash of irritation at being called crude, but he pushed it down. He was here to help, not to argue about human communication methods. They reached a great door that towered above them, covered in symbols that seemed to move and change as Jake watched. The Queen raised her hand and the door slowly opened. The sound it made was like 1,000 voices singing in harmony. Inside, Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. Princess Lyra lay on a bed of crystallized light, but she was being consumed by something that looked like living shadow. Dark tendrils wrapped around her body, pulsing with their own evil light. Where they touched her, her energy form flickered and dimmed. "My daughter," the Queen whispered, and Jake felt her pain like a physical blow to his chest. The princess was beautiful in the same otherworldly way as her mother, but Jake could see that she was dying. Her light was fading and the shadows were growing stronger. They seemed to drink in the light around them, leaving only darkness behind. "What is that thing?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We call it the Shadow Plague," came a new voice. Jake turned to see another being approaching them. This one was different from the Queen, more angular and cold. Its form was more stable, like it had chosen to be more solid than the others. "I am Nexus Prime," the being said. "I serve as the Queen's chief advisor and keeper of knowledge. I have studied this parasite for centuries." Jake looked back at the dying princess. "How long has she been like this?" "3 of your months," Nexus Prime replied. "The Shadow Plague is not a disease as you would understand it. It is a predatory consciousness that has destroyed dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. It feeds on complex thought patterns and advanced technology." "I don't understand," Jake said. "How can thoughts be food for something?" The Queen moved closer to her daughter's bed. "Your species thinks with simple brain patterns. You use electrical signals and chemical reactions, but evolved beings like us think with pure energy. Our consciousness exists as patterns of light and force. The Shadow Plague consumes these patterns," Nexus Prime continued. "It grows stronger. With each mind it devours. The more advanced a civilization becomes, the more vulnerable they are to its influence." Jake stared at the writhing shadows that covered the princess. "So because we're less advanced, we're harder for it to eat?" "Exactly," the Queen said. "Your primitive neural patterns are toxic to the plague. It cannot process the chaotic electrical storms that you call thought." Jake felt insulted again at being called primitive, but he was starting to understand. "You've been watching us?" "For centuries," Nexus Prime confirmed. "Initially, we dismissed your species as another primitive race that would eventually destroy itself. But recent observations have revealed something interesting about humans." "What's that?" "You adapt in ways that purely logical beings cannot," the Queen explained. "Where we see problems to be solved through technology and reason, you see obstacles to be overcome through determination and creativity." Jake looked around the chamber. Even now he could see other ethereal beings floating near the walls, watching him with their strange, star-like eyes. They all seemed to be waiting for something. "I still don't understand how I can help," Jake said. "I'm just one person. I don't have any special powers or weapons." "You have something better," the Queen replied. "You have the ability to think in patterns that the Shadow Plague cannot predict or consume." Nexus Prime gestured toward the princess. "We have tried everything our science can offer. Energy weapons, nanotechnology, direct consciousness manipulation. Each attempt only makes the plague stronger. It learns from our attacks," the Queen added. "It adapts to our logical approaches because it understands advanced thought patterns. But human consciousness is different." Jake moved closer to the princess's bed. Up close, he could see that the shadows weren't just covering her body. They were actually inside her, flowing through her energy form like poison in her veins. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" He said. "We need you to make direct contact with the plague," Nexus Prime said, "to allow it to taste human consciousness and see how it reacts." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. You want me to let that thing into my mind? It is dangerous, the Queen admitted. The plague has never encountered a human mind before. We do not know how it will react, but you're asking me to do it anyway. The Queen's form shimmered, and Jake felt waves of desperate hope coming from her. You are our only chance. My daughter is dying, and with her death, the Shadow Plague will gain access to her royal bloodline. It will use that connection to infect our entire civilization. Jake looked at the princess again. She was so young, even by ethereal standards. Her light was growing dimmer by the minute. If I do this and it goes wrong, I could die, Jake said. Yes, the Queen replied honestly. But if you do nothing, both my daughter and my entire species will die. The Shadow Plague will use our advanced technology to spread across the galaxy. Eventually, it will reach Earth. Jake felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He thought about his crew back on the horizon's edge, waiting for him to return. He thought about Earth, billions of people who had no idea that an ancient evil was slowly consuming the galaxy. There's something else, Nexus Prime said. Something that makes your species unique among all the races we have encountered. What? You refuse to give up, the Queen said. Even when faced with impossible odds, humans find a way to keep fighting. This quality, which we initially saw as crude stubbornness, may be exactly what we need. Jake stared at the dying princess, her light growing fainter with each passing moment. He thought about everything the Queen had told him, about the Shadow Plague and the fate of entire civilizations. If I agree to this, he said slowly, what happens to my crew? They will be safe, the Queen promised. Regardless of what happens to you, we will ensure they return to Earth safely. Jake took a deep breath. He looked at the princess one more time, then turned to face the Queen. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. Jake spent the next several hours in what the ethereals called their knowledge chamber, trying to understand something that seemed impossible to grasp. The room was filled with floating crystals that contained the accumulated wisdom of millions of years, but every time Jake tried to access their information, his human brain felt like it was going to explode. This isn't working, Jake said, rubbing his temples where a massive headache was building. I can't understand any of this advanced stuff. Nexus Prime hovered nearby, his energy form pulsing with what Jake had learned was frustration. Perhaps that is the point, he said. We have been approaching this problem with our most sophisticated tools and theories. Maybe we need to think more simply. Jake looked around the chamber at the hundreds of floating knowledge crystals. Each one contained more information than the entire human internet, but none of it seemed helpful. Tell me about the Shadow Plague in simple terms, he said. Pretend I'm a child. The Queen materialized beside them, her form flickering with worry. The Shadow Plague is like a virus, she began. But instead of infecting bodies, it infects minds. It spreads by learning how different species think. Okay, that makes sense, Jake said. So it's like a computer virus for brains. Yes, Nexus Prime replied. And just as a computer virus is designed to attack specific operating systems, the Shadow Plague is designed to attack advanced consciousness patterns. Jake felt something click in his mind. So it's like a virus that only works on advanced computers, but can't infect simple machines? Exactly, the Queen said, and Jake felt a wave of excitement from her. Your human consciousness is like an old, simple machine that the virus doesn't know how to attack. Jake stood up and started pacing around the chamber. This was how he always solved problems, by moving and thinking at the same time. But you said I need to let it into my mind. How does that help the princess? The plague learns by consuming consciousness, Nexus Prime explained. When it encounters a mind it cannot understand or digest, it becomes confused and weakened. So I'm like poison to it? In a way, yes, the Queen replied. But more than that, you might be able to disrupt its connection to my daughter. Jake stopped pacing. How? The plague maintains a link with every mind it has infected, the Queen explained. If you can confuse it enough while it's trying to process your consciousness, you might be able to send that confusion back through the link to where it's holding my daughter. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. So I become a weapon? You become hope, the Queen said simply. Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what they were asking him to do. What if it kills me? Then you will die as a hero, Nexus Prime said bluntly. But if you do nothing, my daughter dies, our civilization falls, and eventually the plague spreads to every world in the galaxy, including Earth. Jake thought about his crew back on the horizon's edge, probably worried sick about him. He thought about Earth, about all the people who had no idea that their entire future might depend on what he decided to do in this strange crystal chamber. There's something else, the Queen said softly. Something we haven't told you. Jake looked at her. What? The plague doesn't just kill its victims, she said. It keeps them alive and aware while it consumes them. My daughter is conscious. Inside that darkness, feeling every moment of her slow destruction. Jake felt sick. She's been awake and aware for 3 months while that thing eats her? Yes, the Queen whispered. She cannot speak, cannot move, cannot even scream. She can only feel the plague growing stronger inside her. Jake clenched his fists. That's torture. Yes, Nexus Prime agreed. And if we fail, she will remain in that state until the plague has consumed every last bit of her consciousness. It could take years. Jake felt anger building inside him, hot and fierce. This was exactly the kind of situation that made humans dangerous. They couldn't stand seeing innocent people suffer, especially when there was something they could do about it. Okay, Jake said, I'll do it. But I want to try something different. What do you mean? The Queen asked. You keep talking about how human consciousness is chaotic and unpredictable, Jake said. But you're trying to plan this like a scientific experiment. What if we just wing it? Nexus Prime's form flickered with confusion. Wing it? Make it up as we go along, Jake explained. Don't plan everything out in advance. Just let me be as human as possible when I face this thing. The Queen considered this. That is extremely dangerous. We would have no way to predict what might happen. Exactly, Jake said with a grim smile. And neither would the shadow plague. Jake could feel the excitement building in his chest, the same feeling he got when he was about to try something that everyone said was impossible. It was a very human feeling, this combination of fear and excitement that made people do crazy things. I want Lisa here, Jake said suddenly. Your communications officer? Nexus Prime asked. Why? Because she understands how I think, Jake replied. If I'm going to be as human as possible, I need another human here to help me stay grounded. The Queen hesitated. Bringing another human into our realm is difficult and dangerous. But possible? Yes, the Queen admitted. Then do it, Jake sighed. And I want her to be able to communicate with me the whole time? Not just through telepathy, but with actual words and sounds. Jake could feel the ethereal's confusion. They had evolved beyond the need for crude sound-based communication, but Jake knew that human voices and human language were part of what made human consciousness so chaotic and unpredictable. Very well, the Queen said finally, but we must hurry. My daughter's light grows weaker with each passing hour. Jake nodded. Then let's go get Lisa and end this thing. As they prepared to transport back to the horizon's edge, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in the ethereal realm. He felt like himself again, like the stubborn, adaptable human who had gotten him this far in life. The ethereals had all their advanced technology and millions of years of knowledge, but they had forgotten something that humans never forgot. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem was to stop trying to be smart about it and just do something crazy enough to work. Are you ready? The Queen asked. Jake grinned, feeling more confident than he had any right to feel. Lady, I was born ready. The Queen's form shimmered with what Jake had learned was amusement. That response makes no logical sense. Welcome to being human, Jake replied. Logic is overrated. And with that, they prepared to transport back to his ship to begin the most dangerous and illogical rescue mission in the history of the galaxy. Jake felt the familiar sensation of the ethereal transport system as he and the Queen materialized on the bridge of the horizon's edge. His crew jumped to their feet. relief and worry mixing on their faces as they saw him return. "Jake, thank God," Lisa said, rushing toward him. "We've been monitoring energy readings from that ship for hours. We thought you were dead." "Not dead yet," Jake replied with a tired smile. "But I need your help with something that's going to sound completely insane." Then Rodriguez looked past Jake to where Queen Seraphine's energy form was hovering near the main screen. "Is that really an alien queen?" "Yes," Jake said. "And her daughter is dying from something that only humans can fight." Jake quickly explained the situation to his crew, watching their faces change from confusion to amazement to horror as he described the shadow plague and what it was doing to Princess Lyra. "So you want to let this thing into your mind?" Carol Martinez asked, her medical training making her immediately concerned. "Jake, that sounds like suicide." "It might be," Jake admitted. "But Lisa, I need you to come with me. I need someone who can keep me grounded in human thinking." Lisa looked at the Queen's shimmering form, then back at Jake. "What exactly are you asking me to do? Talk to me," Jake said. "When I'm facing this thing, I need you to keep talking to me in normal human words. Remind me of home, of Earth, of all the things that make us human." "The shadow plague feeds on advanced consciousness," the Queen explained, her voice speaking directly into all their minds. "But human consciousness is chaotic and unpredictable. If Jake can maintain his humanity, while in contact with the plague, he might be able to confuse it enough to save my daughter." Ben shook his head. "This is crazy." "You're talking about fighting something that has destroyed entire civilizations with the power of being stubborn and unpredictable," Jake said. "Yeah, it's crazy, but crazy is what humans do best." Lisa looked at Jake for a long moment. "If I do this, if I come with you, what are the chances we both make it back?" Jake met her eyes. "Honestly, I have no idea. But if we don't try, that girl is going to suffer for years before she dies, and then this thing is going to spread across the galaxy until it reaches Earth. And you think our messy human thoughts can stop it?" "I think our messy human thoughts are the only thing that can stop it," Jake replied. Lisa took a deep breath. "Okay, I'm in." The Queen's form pulsed with gratitude. "I will transport you both to the medical chamber where the procedure will take place. Your friend will be safe, but Jake, you will be in great danger." "I understand," Jake said. He turned to the rest of his crew. "Ben, if this goes wrong, get everyone home and tell Earth what happened here. Make sure they know about the shadow plague." "Jake," Carol said, "let me come too. If something goes wrong medically, you'll need a doctor." "No," Jake said firmly. "I need you to stay here and take care of the ship. If Lisa and I don't make it back, you're the one who needs to get everyone home safely." The Queen gestured toward the energy doorway that was forming in the middle of the bridge. "We must hurry. My daughter's condition is worsening." Jake and Lisa stepped through the doorway together, and once again Jake felt the disorienting sensation of being transported through space and dimensions that human minds weren't designed to understand. They materialized in a new chamber that looked like a combination of a hospital and a temple. The walls were covered with symbols that pulsed with soft light, and in the center of the room was a bed made of crystallized energy. "This is where the procedure will take place," the Queen explained. "Jake, you will lie on the bed, and we will introduce a small sample of the shadow plague into your consciousness." "How small?" Jake asked. "Small enough that it should not kill you immediately," Nexus Prime said as he appeared beside the Queen. "Large enough to create a connection to the plague that is consuming the princess." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Should not kill me immediately. That's comforting." "Jake," Lisa said, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Are you sure about this?" Jake looked at her, then at the Queen, then at the strange chamber around them. "No, I'm not sure about anything, but that's kind of the point, isn't it?" He walked over to the energy bed and sat down. It felt warm and somehow alive beneath him. "What do I need to do?" "Simply be yourself," the Queen said. "When the plague enters your mind, do not try to fight it logically. Do not try to understand it or analyze it. Just be as human as possible. And Lisa, I will establish a communication link between you," Nexus Prime said. She will be able to speak to you throughout the procedure. Jake lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. Lisa, no matter what happens, keep talking to me. Tell me about Earth, about home, about anything that reminds me I'm human. I will, Lisa promised. Are you ready? The Queen asked. Jake opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling of the chamber, where strange lights danced in patterns that seemed almost like stars. As ready as I'll ever be. The Queen raised her hands, and Jake felt something cold and dark beginning to seep into his mind. It started small, like a whisper in the back of his thoughts, but he could feel it growing stronger. Jake, Lisa's voice came through clearly. Remember that time in training when you tried to impress everyone by fixing the navigation system and ended up getting us lost for 3 days? Jake smiled despite the growing darkness in his mind. Yeah. And you wouldn't let me forget it for months. You were so stubborn, Lisa continued. You kept insisting you knew where we were even when we were obviously going in circles. The shadow plague was spreading through Jake's consciousness now, and he could feel it trying to understand his thoughts. But instead of fighting it, he let Lisa's words wash over him, reminding him of who he was. And remember that terrible movie we watched last week? Lisa said, the one with the robots that made no sense? You mean the one where you threw popcorn at the screen and yelled at the bad writing? Jake replied. The plague was stronger now, pressing against his mind like a cold weight. He could feel it trying to catalog his thoughts, to understand the patterns of human consciousness. But Jake's mind was full of random memories, emotions, and the sound of Lisa's voice talking about home. Jake, how do you feel? The Queen asked. Like, I've got the worst headache in the history of the universe, Jake replied, but also like I want to punch something. That is very human. Nexus Prime observed. The shadow plague was fighting to understand Jake's chaotic thoughts, but every time it tried to find a pattern, Jake would remember something else. His first day of school, the taste of his mother's cooking, the feeling of rain on his face, the sound of Lisa laughing at his terrible jokes. It's working, the Queen said, her voice filled with amazement. The plague is becoming confused. It cannot process the randomness of human consciousness. Jake felt the plague's confusion like a feedback loop in his mind. It was trying to consume his thoughts, but human thoughts didn't follow the logical patterns it was designed to eat. Now, the Queen said urgently, we must establish the connection to my daughter. Jake felt a new sensation, like a door opening in his mind. Suddenly he could sense Princess Lyra, trapped in her own body, aware but unable to move or speak. Princess, Jake thought as loudly as he could, can you hear me? Through the connection, he felt her surprise and hope. For the first time in months, she was not alone with the plague. Hold on, Jake told her. We're going to get you out of this. And then, through the link the plague had created, Jake began to flood Princess Lyra's consciousness with the most human thing he could think of. The absolute refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. Jake felt Princess Lyra's consciousness like a flickering candle in an ocean of darkness. The shadow plague had wrapped itself around her mind so completely that she could barely think, but through their connection, Jake could sense her desperate hope. Princess, I'm here, Jake thought as hard as he could. I know you're scared and tired, but I need you to listen to me. Through the plague's connection, he felt her response, weak but determined. Who are you? My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a human, he replied. Your mother sent me to get you out of this mess. Jake could feel the shadow plague reacting to their communication, trying to understand what was happening. It had never encountered anything like human consciousness before, and Jake's chaotic thoughts were like poison to its organized structure. Lisa, Jake said out loud, keep talking to me. Tell me more stories about home. Remember when we were kids and you tried to build that rocket in your backyard? Lisa said, her voice cutting through the darkness in Jake's mind. You were so sure it would work, even though it was just a cardboard tube and some firecrackers. Jake smiled, and through their connection, Princess Lyra felt his amusement. It was such a strange emotion to her, this combination of joy and foolishness that seemed to define human behavior. It almost worked, Jake said. If the neighbor's cat hadn't knocked it over. The shadow plague pressed harder against Jake's mind, trying to understand these random memories that made no logical sense. Why did humans store information about failed experiments and interfering animals? What purpose did these chaotic recollections serve? Jake felt the plague's confusion and realized this was his chance. Instead of trying to fight the creature directly, he began flooding Princess Lyra's consciousness with the most human emotions he could summon: stubborn determination, irrational hope, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Princess thought, "I'm going to teach you something that humans are really good at." "What?" she replied, her mental voice growing slightly stronger. "Being unreasonably optimistic," Jake said. "No matter how bad things get, humans always believe they can make them better." Through their connection, Jake began sharing memories of every time humans had faced impossible odds and won anyway. He showed her images of people climbing mountains they shouldn't have been able to climb, solving problems they weren't smart enough to solve, and surviving disasters that should have killed them. The shadow plague recoiled from these memories. They made no sense from a logical standpoint. Why would creatures deliberately put themselves in danger? Why would they waste energy on hopeless causes? Why would they keep fighting when defeat was certain? Because that's what humans do, Jake sighed, sensing the plague's confusion. "We're too stupid to know when we're beaten." Princess Lyra felt something stirring inside her that she had never experienced before. It was like a fire in her chest, warm and fierce and completely illogical. The humans called it hope, but it felt more like controlled madness. "I can feel something changing," the Queen's voice said in the medical chamber. "The plague's grip? Oh, my daughter is weakening." Jake pushed harder, flooding the connection with more human emotions. He shared the feeling of laughing at inappropriate times, of crying at sad movies, of getting angry at injustice, and of loving people even when they were annoying. The shadow plague was becoming more confused by the minute. These emotions served no evolutionary purpose that it could understand. They made humans less efficient, less logical, and less predictable. But somehow, they also made humans stronger in ways that the plague couldn't process. "Jake," Lisa's voice came through clearly. "Remember that time you got lost in the woods during our survival training?" "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice strained as the plague pressed against his consciousness. "I wandered around for 2 days eating berries and talking to myself. And when the rescue team found you, you were singing old Earth songs at the top of your lungs," Lisa continued. "You said it kept you from going crazy." Jake laughed, and the sound of human laughter echoed through the plague's connection. Princess Lyra felt the joy in that sound, the pure emotional response that had nothing to do with logic or survival. "Singing to stay sane," Jake thought to her. "Only humans would think that makes sense." The plague was struggling now, its organized structure breaking down as it tried to process the chaos of human consciousness. It had been designed to feed on advanced, logical thought patterns, but human thoughts were neither advanced nor logical. They were messy, contradictory, and completely unpredictable. Princess Lyra felt the plague's grip loosening as Jake's emotions filled her mind. For the first time in months, she was able to move her own thoughts freely. The darkness was still there, but it no longer controlled her completely. "I can think clearly," she said, wonder in her mental voice. "I can feel myself again." "That's just the beginning," Jake replied. "Now I'm going to teach you the most important human skill of all." "What's that?" "How to get really, really angry at things that hurt people you care about," Jake said. Jake focused on every memory he had of righteous anger, of the fury that humans felt when they saw injustice or cruelty. He shared the rage of parents protecting their children, of friends defending each other, and of ordinary people standing up to bullies. Princess Lyra felt this anger flowing into her consciousness, and suddenly she understood something fundamental about humans. They weren't just chaotic and unpredictable, they were fierce in their protection of others. They would fight impossible battles not for themselves, but for people they loved. "The plague has been hurting me for months," Princess Lyra said, and Jake could feel her own anger beginning to build. "It has been keeping me trapped and aware while it slowly consumed me?" "Yeah," Jake replied. "And that makes me really mad." It makes me angry too, the princess said, and her mental voice was growing stronger by the moment. The shadow plague recoiled as Princess Lyra's consciousness blazed with newfound fury. This wasn't the cold, logical anger of an advanced being. It was the hot, messy, completely irrational rage of someone who had been hurt and was refusing to take it anymore. Now, Jake said, let's show this thing what happens when you mess with someone a human cares about. Together, Jake and Princess Lyra turned their combined consciousness toward the shadow plague. It tried to retreat, but it was too late. It had created the connection, and now it was trapped with two minds that refused to be consumed. The plague screamed, a sound that existed only in thought but was more terrible than any physical noise. It had never encountered minds that could resist its influence through pure, stubborn refusal to give up. Jake felt the plague beginning to break apart, its organized structure crumbling under the assault of chaotic human emotions and Princess Lyra's newfound determination. The creature that had destroyed entire civilizations was being defeated by the simple human refusal to accept defeat. It's working, the queen's voice said, filled with amazement. The plague is dying. Princess Lyra's light began to return, blazing brighter than it had ever been before. But now her light was different, touched with something that had never existed in ethereal consciousness before: the wild, beautiful chaos of human emotion. The shadow plague gave one final scream and then dissolved completely, unable to survive in the presence of minds that thought with their hearts as much as their heads. Jake felt the connection fade as the plague died, leaving him exhausted but triumphant on the energy bed. Through the chamber's communication system, he could hear Princess Lyra's voice for the first time, speaking with joy and wonder. "Mother," she said, "I'm free. And I understand now why the humans are special. They don't just think, they feel, and their feelings make them stronger than any technology." The queen's form blazed with joy as she rushed to her daughter's side. "My child, you're alive! You're truly alive!" Jake sat up slowly, his head still pounding from his contact with the plague. "How do you feel, Princess?" "Different," she replied. "Honestly, the human emotions you shared with me have changed something inside me. I can still think like an ethereal, but now I can also feel like a human. Is that good or bad?" Jake asked. "It's wonderful," Princess Lyra said. "For the first time in my existence, I understand what it means to truly live rather than simply exist." Lisa helped Jake stand up, her face bright with relief. "So we did it? We actually defeated that thing." "We did more than that," the queen said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have given my daughter something precious. You have taught her how to hope, how to fight, and how to love." Jake looked around the medical chamber, still hardly believing what had happened. "So what now?" "Now," the queen replied, "you return to your ship and your people, knowing that you have saved not just my daughter, but our entire civilization. The shadow plague is gone forever, destroyed by the one thing it could never understand: the beautiful chaos of human consciousness." As they prepared to return to the horizon's edge, Princess Lyra spoke one more time. "Jake Morrison," she said, "thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to refuse to believe it's impossible." Jake grinned. "Princess, you're going to do just fine. You're starting to think like a human." And as they transported back to his ship, Jake reflected on the strangest truth he had ever encountered. Sometimes being primitive and chaotic